The message was already 4 days old when he finally rose to come. 4 days, long enough for a body to begin surrendering to decay. And somewhere on the road from the Jordan, dust still clinging to his sandals, a man was walking toward a grief he could have prevented, and chose not to. In Bethany, a woman kept looking down the road every morning, and every morning the road stayed empty. Her name was Martha. And this is not the story of a miracle. This is the story of what it cost to believe in one. Martha ran a household of 3, her sister Mary, her brother Lazarus, and a rhythm of hospitality so steady the neighbors set their own meals by it. She was the one who counted the oil jars before Passover, who knew which merchant in the market sold bread that didn't turn hard by evening, who could feed 13 unexpected guests without her hand shaking. She was, by every account left to us, the kind of woman a village leaned on without ever quite saying thank you for it. Bethany sat on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, close enough to Jerusalem, under 2 miles by the old road, that pilgrims passed through it on their way up to the temple courts, and far enough around the shoulder of the hill that its nights were quiet in a way the cities never were. The soil there was good for olives and figs. The limestone beneath it, soft enough to cut, was why so many families in the region buried their dead in caves carved from the hillside rather than graves dug into open ground. It was an ordinary village. It only became extraordinary because of who kept walking into it. Luke had already told part of her story once, years before this. She was the sister found bustling in the kitchen while Mary sat at the teacher's feet, the one gently corrected for being anxious and troubled about many things. That Martha, practical, a little defensive, easily overlooked by anyone looking for the more dramatic sister, is the same woman who, in this house, will stand in the middle of a dirt road and say the truest, angriest, most faithful sentence of her life. But that comes later. First, there is a fever. It starts the way fevers start. A flushed face at the evening meal, a complaint about the light through the window being too bright. Lazarus waves it off. He has always been the strong one, the brother both sisters quietly built their sense of safety around, the one who settled arguments with the neighbors and carried the heaviest jars up from the well without being asked. By the second day, he cannot sit up without help. By the third, his breathing has changed in a way that frightens Mary into silence and pushes Martha into motion. She sends a servant running toward the Jordan Valley with a single message, 4 words in the original text, carrying the full weight of a plea. Lord, the one you love is sick. She does not ask him to come. She does not have to. She trusts the friendship is enough. She has watched this man heal strangers on the road with less reason to care than he has for her own brother. Surely, she thinks, surely for Lazarus, he will not even finish the sentence before he is already walking. She keeps a lamp burning by the door 2 nights running, past the hour she would normally extinguish it to save the oil, because she believes, she is certain, that he will arrive before morning, and she does not want him to arrive to a dark house. Mary stops speaking at meals, not sadness yet, something quieter, a held breath. She sits with her hands folded the way she used to sit at the teacher's feet, except now there is no one to listen to, only a door that does not open. On the 4th morning, a neighbor arrives not to ask how Lazarus is doing, but to ask, gently, delicately, if they have chosen a burial cave yet, or if the family plot on the hillside will do. The women of Bethany already know something Martha has not let herself say out loud. Word travels faster through a village than through a sick room. There is an economic reality tucked quietly inside this crisis, one easy to miss on a first reading. A household without a working adult male, no father mentioned anywhere in the text, only 3 siblings running the family estate together, was already a fragile arrangement in first-century Judean society, dependent on Lazarus for whatever trade or land he oversaw, and on Martha's management of the household's resources to make that arrangement function day to day. If Lazarus died, the sisters did not only lose a brother, They lost the frame that held their whole social and economic position together. That is part of what stood behind the panic in that four-word message sent toward the Jordan. The historical weight of that fourth day cannot be separated from the story. In the burial customs of first-century Judea, it was widely held that the soul lingered near the body for 3 days, hoping to return, and that by the fourth day, once visible decomposition had begun, all such hope was considered theologically finished. This was not superstition to the mourners gathered in that house. It was the boundary of what was believed possible in the natural order. Lazarus had been in the tomb 4 days by the time Jesus arrived. A detail John records with the precision of someone who was there, not the vagueness of legend passed down secondhand. And it places what is coming on the far side of every explanation available to that culture. 4 days was not a delay. 4 days was, to everyone standing in that village, a door already closed. Before the fever, before the tomb, there had been an evening when the house was full and loud, and Martha had stood in the doorway of her own kitchen and watched Jesus laugh at something Lazarus had said and thought, "This is what safety feels like. This is what having him near does to a house." The oil lamps had burned low, and no one had noticed, because no one wanted the evening to end enough to get up and refill them. She had built her faith on evenings like that one, not on miracles she'd witnessed from a distance, in a crowd, the way so many in Judea had, but on a friendship, close enough to touch, meals shared, small arguments settled over bread, a rabbi who ate at her table like family instead of like a guest she needed to impress. Mary's devotion had always been the visible kind, the kind Luke bothered to write down, sitting, listening, and, in a scene still to come, not long after this one, anointing his feet with nard so costly the whole room would fall silent at the smell of it. Martha's devotion lived somewhere less noticed, in the labor of keeping a household running so that faith had somewhere warm to land when it arrived hungry and tired from the road. She remembered, too, the day Lazarus had first brought Jesus home, years earlier. Introducing him the way you introduce someone you already suspect will change your life. Martha had made too much food that night, nervous, wanting everything to be right, burning the first batch of bread and hiding the evidence before anyone noticed. Jesus had noticed the effort before he noticed the meal. He always did. He asked her once what her father had taught her about hospitality, and listened to the answer as though it mattered as much as anything a Pharisee might have asked him that week. She remembered a third evening, quieter than the others, when Lazarus had been troubled about a debt owed to a neighbor, and Jesus had simply sat with him on the roof until the stars came out, saying almost nothing. And Lazarus had come down changed, not because the debt was solved, but because he had been sat with. That was the man she had sent for. Not a distant miracle worker summoned for a favor, but a friend who owed her nothing and had given her everything anyway: presence, patience, the strange dignity of being taken seriously by someone whose authority half of Judea was still arguing about. The Gospel of John will later use a specific Greek word, ephili, to describe what Jesus felt for this family, not the general love owed to any stranger or neighbor, but the particular chosen affection of friendship. 3 separate names are attached to that verb in the text: Martha, Mary, Lazarus. All 3 personally loved, named individually rather than swept together as the family. All 3, about to watch that love look for 4 unbearable days, exactly like absence. This is what made the silence so hard to carry. It was not the silence of a stranger who might not have heard in time. It was the silence of someone who had heard everything, plainly, urgently, and had chosen deliberately not to come. The social hierarchy of the period gave Martha almost no formal standing to demand an explanation for that silence. A woman in her position could send a message. She could not summon a rabbi the way a synagogue official might. Her only real power in this story was the one she used anyway. walking out onto an open road, uninvited, to say what she needed to say to a man half of Judea addressed with careful deference. That she did it at all, before any of the men in her circle of mourners thought to, is itself part of what the gospel writer chose to preserve. The first moment of rising tension is arithmetic, and it is almost unbearable in its plainness. Bethany, to the region beyond the Jordan where Jesus was staying at the time, is roughly a day's journey on foot. Martha's servant reaches him quickly enough, but the text records something the sisters would not learn until much later. Jesus, hearing that Lazarus was sick, stayed exactly where he was for 2 more days, not confused about the danger, not delayed by distance or circumstance beyond his control. He chose to wait, and the choosing is the wound the sisters will have to carry before they are given any reason to understand its purpose. The second moment is the disciples' fear, and it deepens the sense that nothing about this decision is simple. When Jesus finally says, "Let us go into Judea again," the disciples push back immediately. The last time he was near Jerusalem, men had picked up stones to kill him. Thomas, of all of them, the one history will remember for his doubt, says the line that reveals how much this decision truly costs. "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Even the men closest to Jesus believe this journey may end in an execution, his or theirs. The stakes in this story were never abstract to anyone standing inside it. The third moment is arrival, and it belongs to Martha alone. Word reaches the house that Jesus is finally approaching the village, 4 days too late by any measure that matters. Mary stays seated inside, undone, unable to move from the floor where the mourners have gathered around her. Martha does something almost nobody expects from a woman in her position, in her century. She gets up without asking anyone's permission, walks out past the edge of Bethany alone, past the mourners still arriving from Jerusalem, and meets him on the open road before he ever reaches the house of grief. "Lord," she says, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." It is not a greeting. It is closer to an indictment, and there is no evidence in the text that she softens it, or apologizes for it, or looks away while she says it. But even now, she continues, "I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." 2 sentences. Grief and faith occupying the same breath, refusing to cancel each other out, refusing the easier path of simply picking one. "Your brother will rise again," he answers. "I know he will rise again," she says, "in the resurrection, on the last day." She has given him the correct theology of her time, the Pharisaic hope in a coming general resurrection, a belief that was not universally shared in first-century Judaism. The Sadducees, notably, rejected it outright, which made this very question a live and contested one in the religious debates of the period. Martha's answer is accurate. It is also, in this exact moment, cold comfort, the theologically correct thing to say, offered by a woman whose brother is still 4 days dead in a cave down the road. And then comes the sentence that turns 400 years of waiting into a single afternoon, spoken not in a synagogue or a temple court, but on a dusty road outside a village most of Judea had never heard of. "I am the resurrection and the life," he says. "The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this? The identification seen here is not staged for drama. It is the moment every viewer who has ever prayed for a later answer instead of a now answer will recognize without needing it explained. The gap between what we believe about eternity and what we are actually asking for on this particular afternoon, in this particular grief, with a particular smell already rising from a particular tomb. "Yes, Lord," Martha says. "I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." It is the fullest confession of faith spoken by anyone in the Gospel of John up to this point, fuller, even, than Peter's, and it is spoken by a grieving woman on an open road, before the miracle, before any proof at all. She does not say it because she understands what is coming. She says it before she understands anything. She does not run back to the house shouting. She does not fall to her knees in the road. She walks, one foot, then the other, on packed dirt still warm from the day's sun, past the same olive trees she has passed 10,000 times without noticing them, and notices every one of them now. He is here, she thinks. He came. He came too late, and he came anyway, and I don't know which of those two things is true yet, or whether they can both be true at once. Her hands are steady on the outside. Inside something has gone very quiet. Not peace, not yet. A kind of suspension, the way the air goes still before a change in weather, nobody has announced. She fixes her eyes on the gate of her own house as she approaches it, the same gate Lazarus used to lean against in the evenings arguing cheerfully with whoever passed, and she cannot look away from it, as though looking away would let the grief back in before she is ready. He said he is the resurrection. He did not say when. He did not say how. He said, "Do you believe this?" And I said yes before I let myself ask what yes would cost me. That was the moment something inside her that had always simply assumed finally had to choose. She goes inside. She tells Mary quietly, close to her ear so the mourners crowded into the front room will not hear it first. The teacher is here, and he is asking for you. She does not explain the conversation on the road. She does not repeat the sentence about resurrection or her own answer to it. Some things are not yet sentences. They are only weight, carried silently behind the ribs, waiting for language and time to catch up to them. Mary rises the moment she hears it, fast enough that the mourners crowded into the house assume she is going to the tomb to weep, and they follow her, filling the narrow street between the houses. She reaches Jesus still outside the village, at the same spot where Martha met him, and falls at his feet, and says the exact words her sister said first, almost word for word. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Two sisters, one accusation, spoken independently of each other, grief finding the same sentence twice, as though there had only ever been one true thing to say. Physical weakness. Martha has not eaten properly in 4 days. She stands now at the edge of the crowd gathering around the tomb, light-headed, the smell of the mourners' incense and the dry afternoon heat pressing against her temples until the edges of her vision blur. She has been the strong one for everyone else in this house since the fever started. No one has thought to ask how she herself is holding up, and she has not thought to tell them. Social exposure. The professional mourners are still wailing loudly, publicly, the way custom demanded of a household in grief, and Martha, standing among them, feels the specific shame of having her private devastation turned into the village's shared performance, her brother's death narrated by strangers hired for the purpose, her own face watched by neighbors deciding how she ought to be reacting. Self-doubt. Did I send the message wrong, she wonders, standing perfectly still while everyone around her weeps? Did I not make it urgent enough? Did he not understand how sick Lazarus truly was, or did he understand completely and let it happen anyway? And if that is true, what kind of yes did I just give him on the road an hour ago? And then Jesus, seeing Mary weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, is deeply moved in spirit and troubled. The Greek suggests something closer to a groan, a physical disturbance, not a calm sorrow, observed from a safe distance. He asks where they have laid him. "Come and see," they say. Jesus wept. 2 words in English. Words in. One word in the Greek, edakryson, the shortest verse in the New Testament, and a different verb entirely from the loud, ritual weeping of the mourners around him, which the text calls kleiontas, public and performed by custom, expected of anyone attending a household in grief. His is quiet, private, a friend's tears, not a crowd's. Even knowing, as the sisters will only understand afterward, exactly what he is about to do, he does not skip the grief to get to the miracle. He does not rush past what 4 days of loss actually cost this family. Some in the crowd murmur, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" It is not cruelty. It is the easier, softer conclusion available to everyone standing there in the heat, surrounded by the smell of a sealed tomb. That this was simply beyond even him, that some doors do not open twice, that hope has a ceiling somewhere, and this may be it. For one breath, standing in that crowd, exhausted and hollowed out by 4 days without proper sleep or food, Martha could let herself agree with them. It would be so much easier than continuing to believe. She does not take it, but it costs her to refuse it. It is not heroic in the moment. It is simply exhausting, the way holding a heavy jar steady with both arms is exhausting long after the muscles have started to shake. Her imperfect support that day is the crowd itself, well-meaning, sincere, offering their theology of loss and their murmured doubts when what the family needed most was only presence, only someone willing to stand quietly beside the grief instead of narrating it. Sympathy without answers. Comfort without the thing itself. It is a kindness, and it is also, somehow, not enough. And no one there is at fault for that. Even the geography of the moment presses in on her. The tomb sits at a slight distance from the village, cut into a low rise of rock, so that the whole gathering has had to walk out under the open afternoon sun to reach it. No shade, no walls, nothing between Martha and the stares of everyone who has come from Jerusalem to see how this family will hold up. She had imagined grief as something private, carried behind a closed door. Instead, it has become a procession, and she is expected to walk in it. They come to the tomb, a cave cut into the limestone hillside, sealed with a stone rolled across its low entrance, the ordinary architecture of burial in that region during the Second Temple period. Rock-cut family tombs of exactly this design have been found throughout the hills surrounding Jerusalem and Bethany by archaeologists working the region, a low opening, an interior burial chamber, sometimes with shelved niches cut into the rock for successive family burials, and a disc-shaped or square-cut stone fitted or rolled across the entrance. It was not a grave dug into soil, the way graves are dug today. It was a door, built to be reopened for the next family member who died, and closed again after. That detail matters. This household had done this before, for other relatives, and had never once expected to do it for Lazarus this early. "Take away the stone," Jesus says. And here is Martha's first small act, the one that is not glorious, not triumphant, simply true to who she has been the entire story. She is the one who speaks the practical, human objection everyone else is too reverent, or too afraid to say aloud. "Lord," she says, "by this time there is a bad odor. He has been there 4 days." It is not doubt exactly. It is the same practical honesty that has defined her since the beginning of this story. The woman who counted the oil jars, who knew which merchant's bread stayed soft, who noticed what needed noticing even now, standing this close to the edge of the impossible. She has just confessed him as the Messiah on the open road. She still says the ordinary, unglamorous thing about the smell. "Did I not tell you," he answers, "that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" They take away the stone. Weeks later, Martha will find herself preparing a meal again, the way she always has, kneading bread at the same low table, and realize her hands have stopped shaking without her noticing exactly when it happened. 2 months after that, she will pass the tomb on an ordinary errand to the well and feel, for the first time since the fever began, nothing but quiet. Not triumph, just quiet. The day she understands she is going to be all right is not a dramatic day at all. It is an ordinary Tuesday, and she is folding linen in the afternoon light, and Lazarus is arguing cheerfully with a neighbor outside about the fair price of grain, alive and ordinary and mildly infuriating in the most beautiful way a person can be. Jesus looks up and prays, not a request, but a statement of thanks already assumed answered before it happens, spoken aloud plainly for the sake of the crowd standing there, so that they might believe he was sent by the Father. Then he calls out, in a voice loud enough for a household 4 days into mourning to hear it as command rather than plea, "Lazarus, come out." And the man who was dead walks out of the tomb, still bound hand and foot in the burial cloths, his face wrapped in a cloth of its own, and Jesus says the smallest, most practical sentence of the entire account, the sentence that turns a cosmic miracle back into an ordinary household task. Take off the grave clothes and let him go. No speech to the crowd, no triumph paraded through the streets of Bethany or carried up the road to Jerusalem. Just a man freed from his wrappings by the hands of the people who loved him. Martha's hands, most likely, the same hands that had lit a lamp 2 nights running, the same hands that had counted oil jars and steadied themselves on a stone gatepost standing in the afternoon light outside a limestone tomb on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives. Martha does not say anything grand. The Gospel does not record her shouting or falling down or demanding vindication for 4 days of grief that turned out, in the end, to have been necessary rather than cruel. It simply moves forward toward a meal she will prepare again, days later, in the same house, for the same friend, this time with Lazarus seated at the table where his empty chair had waited. The prophecy Jesus spoke on the road outside Bethany, "I am the resurrection and the life," was not fully understood by anyone standing there that afternoon, not even by Martha, who had already said yes to it before she had any proof it was true. It would take another death and another tomb cut from the same Judean limestone and another stone rolled away not many weeks later before the sentence found its full and final weight. Some scholars have long noted the deliberate echo between this scene and the one still to come: a sealed tomb, a grieving woman, a stone removed, a voice that calls someone by name out of death. Martha's story in this reading was never only about her brother. It was the first time anyone heard out loud what the ending was going to be. Word of what happened at that tomb travels quickly, the way word always did in a region this small, this closely watched by both pilgrims and by the religious authorities in Jerusalem only 2 miles up the road. Some who witnessed it will go on to believe. Others, the text tells us plainly, will go straight to the Pharisees to report it. And it is this very miracle, this walking, breathing proof, standing at Martha's table, that will help set in motion the events of the final Passover still to come. The greatest sign of life this village will ever witness becomes, within days, part of the reason a plan is made to end another life entirely. Martha could not have known that yet, setting the table that evening. She only knew her brother was hungry, and that hunger, after 4 days of death, felt like the most ordinary miracle in the world. She goes back to her kitchen. She counts the oil jars. She sets the table for one more than the day before. If this story moved something in you, tell me in the comments. I read every one.